Welcome to the LexisNexis Evolving IP podcast, and today's episode, the Unitary Patent, 18 months on. I'm Nigel Schweitzer, and I'm joined by co-host Francesca Lavoie. Hi, Frankie.
Hi, Nigel. How are you today?
Pretty good. I'm glad the cold snap has passed and we're now enjoying a balmy November. But we are excited to welcome Bobby Mukherjee to our podcast series. Pleasure to have you with us, Bobby.
Thank you, Francesca and Nigel. It's a real pleasure and honor to join you today on your podcast.
Well, Bobby, it's great to get you on Evolving IP, and especially as you've had such a long-standing relationship with Nigel, and we're a bit nostalgic on the podcast today, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But delighted to have you here and to talk about something that is relatively new, even though it's 18 months on. But before we get into that, for our listeners today, could you maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, your background in IP, and we can also maybe find out a little bit about BAE Systems as well.
So I'm Bobby Mukherjee, Chief Counsel, IP Technology Law, BAE Systems PLC. I've worked in this role in the company for 15 years, heading up one of the largest in-house IP teams in the country. My commercial team and patents team work closely together and with the business, advising on all aspects of IP. I have a great team. I'm still learning new things, gaining fresh perspectives, and motivated by what can be collectively achieved, driving IP for value in different contexts through constructive, trusted collaboration with internal and external stakeholders. Now, the company is a FTSE 30, headquartered in the UK with an extensive international footprint, provides some of the world's most advanced technology-led defence, aerospace and security solutions. In the UK, we deliver a wide range of products and capability across the air, maritime and land, and digital intelligence sectors, lines of business, as well as electronic systems.
Well, thank you. You've been involved with SEPA as well and become the president. Could you tell us just a little bit about that?
Well, so taking a step back, maybe I should share with you a few highlights of my policy work. So during my IP Federation presidential term, which was 2012 to 2014, I do remember working on the Unified Patent Court project when the UK signed up to the Unified Patent Court agreement. I had to play a prominent role on behalf of UK IP intensive industry in actively engaging with the parliamentary stages of the UK IP Bill 2013 to 14. This resulted in the UK IP Act 2014 with a positive outcome for industry. And it made me realise then, from that personal direct experience, how important it is for people with relevant business and IP expertise to get directly involved and to help shape IP policy positively for the benefit of UK PLC. More recently, in the context of post-Brexit trade negotiations, I did give evidence on the CPTPP IP provisions to the influential House of Commons International Trade Select Committee. And the results of sustained diligent work in that area involving the IP Federation and the Chartered Institute of Patent Attorneys, SEPA, working closely together with government and others, we managed to secure suitable IP carve-outs for the UK. And by ensuring that the UK is acceding to CPTPP on terms which do not threaten UK's European Patent Convention membership, and which promote international harmonisation of patent laws, we successfully protected the UK patent profession and the wider innovation ecosystem here. I'm incredibly proud of that outcome. Now, looking ahead, I feel immensely privileged and excited to be the next SEPA president as of 1st of January. An area of focus is how to improve access into the UK IP profession. That's close to my heart, through the creation and development of new vocational pathways, namely through new IP apprenticeships for different roles. For me, it makes complete business sense, and it's fundamentally about advancing social mobility. I feel there are many talented people out there with whom we are not currently engaging, who may never have heard about IP or our profession, who currently don't want or can't afford to go to university. So let's give those people an equal opportunity to access and contribute to our amazing profession. And by doing so, let's raise awareness of what we all do.
That sounds fantastic. And I think we should get you back for another podcast to talk about some of the work that you'll be doing as president. I think today we might zone in now onto the Unitary Patent. We're 18 months on from the launch of Unitary Patent system. What is a unitary patent, and why does it matter? Can you maybe enlighten us?
The arrival of the Unitary Patent, the UP, and the Unified Patent Court, the UPC, is the biggest, most exciting development, I think, in European patent law and practice over the past 50 years or so. It matters because it provides uniform patent protection through a single new patent right, the Unitary Patent, the UP, across all participating EU member states. And it provides a litigation system under the UPC, a one-stop shop, allowing for pan-European injunctions and damages awards. So it's a huge step forward. It's worth stressing that the UPC, established by the Unified Patent Court Agreement, the UPCA, is a single court with exclusive jurisdiction over the new European patents with unitary effect, uptake of which is now running at around 25% of grants.
And I guess the next question is, why is it taking so long to come into effect?
Indeed. It eventually came into effect on the 1st of June 2023, after many false starts. It took a long time and strong political will to bring everyone together on this project. It involved many different people, different stakeholders with different valid perspectives. As well as legal and technical dimensions, it had a key complex political dimension which should not be underestimated. Casting my mind back, I should mention in particular the UK referendum on Brexit, which took place in 2016. On my birthday, actually, the 23rd of June. So I remember it particularly well. In 2020, the UK finally withdrew from the EU and then withdrew its ratification of the UPC whilst remaining a party to the non-EU European Patent Convention. In 2021, the German Constitutional Court rejected the challenge to the UPC, and Germany ratified the Protocol of Provisional Application, paving the way for ratification of the UPC itself and the launch of the UPC.
So, and you mentioned the 18 member states that have now signed up. That also gives a bit of a hint to why sometimes these can take so long. How do you think that's going to pan out?
Yes, I think the UPC project is a potential game changer, provided it is able to maintain its quality, predictability, and balance, and speed as its caseload increases, amplified by the extensive geographic reach of its decisions. It remains an open question as to whether this would compensate for the level of fees and the risk of having to pay substantial costs to the winning party if one loses, as compared to the USA. And of course, the populations covered by the EU participating member states, it's 18 at the moment, and the USA, are, I think, roughly comparable. It's more than 300 million people.
So, Bobby, you mentioned Brexit and the UK's departure from the European Union. How did that affect the UK's involvement in the Unitary Patent, and was it a good or a bad thing?
Pre-Brexit, as I recall, there was strong consensus amongst the UK legal IP profession that we should be part of the project. Leading lights here, Kevin Mooney, Sir Robin Jacob, as well as other esteemed colleagues across the UK industry and private practice, including CIPA and IP Fed, had worked assiduously with UK government officials to support the project, including shaping the rules of procedure, for example, over many years. A very significant amount of UK resource and time had been dedicated to the project. Under the UPCA, London had originally been assigned one of the central division seats, but once UK left the UPCA, that needed to be reassigned and subsequently was allocated to Milan. If we had started from scratch, this is exactly the kind of project in Europe we would have all wanted to see. So it was disappointing to me personally when the UK withdrew its ratification of the UPC. The Prime Minister at the time, however, couldn't allow the UK to be part of a project in which the EU Court of Justice, the CJEU, had a role. Personally, I still think it may be possible for the UK to rejoin the project at a later time. It's certainly worth bearing in mind for the future.
Thank you. Well, that's we'll definitely have to see what happens in the future. But just thinking about some of the themes that I think you've mentioned, some aspirations around the quality, the predictability, the balance, and maybe even the speed. Do you think it'll be all of these things?
Yeah, good questions, Francesca. Potentially the UPC project is a game changer. provided it is able to maintain its quality, its predictability, balance, and speed as its caseload increases, amplified by the extensive geographic reach of its decisions. So far, so good.
Yes, definitely very comparable. Nigel, you've been an IP practitioner and you've been advising IP practitioners in terms of how to make better decisions. These themes are quite common to what you've been proposing in terms of the quality, predictability, balance, and speed. How would you say those can be married up for IP teams given the launch of the UPC?
The thing which is compelling about the way Bobby sets the unitary patent into a global context and into a European context, of course, is the fact that IP is now global. I mean, maybe it's always been global, but certainly if you go back into Bobby's career, my career, mine, as I now know from my visit to Durham University this week, 40 years I've been in this profession. And I definitely think we're much flatter as an economy. The idea of IP not being global is kind of like, would be weird. And so national laws are, clearly they're important because IP isn't the same. But this idea now that we have 18 countries aligned on how patents could be enforced, how they could be granted is fabulous. And obviously those measures that Bobby just described of quality, predictability, balance, and speed, if you can have that in Europe as a sort of an IP superpower, then leave aside population, but the balance as you look at it from the US, China, and Europe just doesn't look quite as scary. Obviously, there's no getting away from Bobby's reminder that Brexit brought our exit from the unitary patent. And I'm with Bobby. I hope we can come back from that.
And thinking about some of those themes, and if you have one patent that's within the new unitary patent system, how does that change the balance of power globally, given the US and China?
So I think we've covered it insofar as it could be a real game changer, provided that we do have that quality, that predictability balance from this new system. And that's what we all want. Users like me, we want this to work. And that's why my company have, in the main, we are in this system. And I know there are others who are exactly in that position. I also hear from people saying, "Oh, well, the UPC is an injunction, is said to be injunction friendly. What will be the impact of that?" It again goes back to this point, I think, around balance and high quality. It's really important that we have these in the judgments. Otherwise, I don't think the system is going to succeed in the longer term, whichever division of the new court we're talking about. And my company is relatively uncontentious in its IP litigation approach compared to many other companies. We are as likely to be defendant as claimant before the UPC. And that's another reason I'm stressing this point about the importance of that quality, that balance and predictability. It really matters to us. And I think it matters to businesses at large, whether they're small, medium or large businesses. One more thought. Whilst we know that the president of the UPC Court of Appeal has already articulated that the judges must think UPC, it is inevitable that the judges, who are human beings after all, will import elements of their past practice into the UPC. For example, the Munich local division with regard to preliminary injunctions. It will now be for the UPC and the judges, I think, to develop a new UPC standard as a blend of best practices in the respective jurisdictions. If, for example, Ireland were to join the UPC following the postponed referendum, personally, I would be pleased if they were able to do so. It would be fascinating to see how the common law practices of Irish judges impact the shaping of that UPC standard.
There's obviously been a lot of positive stories around the unitary patent system. One of the maybe not so positive stories that you hear, and whether it's scaremongering or not, is, is this an opportunity for non-practicing entities to bring more litigation cases against operating companies? And I guess the scaremongering or fear maybe comes from the fact that within the US system, half of the US litigations come from MPEs or non-practicing entities. So I think it'd be good to get your view on that for our listeners.
It's a good question. So by way of clarification as to what we mean by non-practicing entity, NPE, here, I think we're really talking about patent assertion entities who don't make or sell anything. And their model is to monetize patents they have acquired through patent assertion activity. And as you say, Francesca, a significant part of patent litigation in the USA currently arises from such activity. The first set of NPE lawsuits, interestingly, reached the UPC in January this year, 7 months after the UPC opening. I think it's still too early to be able to answer your question with certainty, recognizing, though, there is a real risk here for business as the defendant, in my view at least. Said against that, though, possibly some patent assertion entities might consider that it is more risky to use the UPC because of central revocation risk, or the risk of having to pay substantial costs to the winning party if one loses, unlike the US litigation system, or the possibility that larger companies might be more motivated to defend against patents in this forum. I know also that the UPC charges significant fees on a value-based sliding scale, coupled with the need to fully flesh out a case at the outset that might make it a higher investment for a patent assertion entity than a claim in, for example, the UK of similar value. So watch this space.
Bobby, that's incredibly diplomatic and I think objective and probably even fair. Let me go and try and take a slightly more edgy answer. If injunctions are available here at the Unitary Patent Court, we are going to get back into the bad old days of forum shopping, whereas a remedy that is not available in the US might be available in Europe. So if the NPE can't get the remedy they want in that country, maybe they'll come to Europe to leverage that opportunity. And I know you talk about costs, and I know you talk about fee shifting, and of course you're right on both counts, but the costs in the US are eye-watering and make the UPC look cheap. That's not an advert for the UPC to put up their fees. I'm just saying in relative terms, it's cheap. And I do think that list of that mantra that you've been going through, a fast injunction, which is cheap, could easily be a magnet for NPEs. And I'm not saying it's been, but I definitely think that every company like BAE Systems should be watching development extremely carefully.
Yes, you make strong points as always, Nigel, and we have to monitor this. And it's really important, as I say, for the judges to continue to produce those high quality, predictable, balanced judgments. And I also think it's important for users to be part of the system to help shape the system. I think that's a really key part of the evolution of the system. And as we know, the case law, the body of case law is evolving too. So those are well-made points, Nigel.
So, Bobby, thinking about patent-owning organisations, should they participate in the UP? Do they have to participate? What are their choices, and what should they be considering?
So, the businesses may not have a choice in participating in the court as a defendant. Plainly, it would be up to the business to decide whether or not to initiate an action as a claimant. So this system will impact on everyone. I think that's an important point to make. In terms of opting in, opting out, I think it depends very much on the business model. Now, opting out at least crown jewel patents and contentious patents early on from the jurisdiction of the new court may well make sense for certain businesses because it avoids risking those patent assets in a system that has been up and running for only 18 months or so, where the level of uncertainty is still high compared to established systems, whilst recognizing that those assets could always be later opted back into the system at a more favorable settled time during the transitional period of 7 years. Unless, of course, an action has already been brought before a national court, that's called a torpedo action. For my company, we've certainly taken the view that it's important to participate in the system and to help shape the system. And in the main, most of our cases are in the system. And I think it's fair to say that the risk of central attack in the UPC it's not of concern to us because we have confidence in the robustness of our patents and in the system in the round.
And you hear some people, I mean, that's a very rounded sort of discussion, Bobby, about whether you should opt in or opt out. Some people, I think, when I hear CFOs or CEOs talk about it, make it look like it's a cost decision. What would you say for those people who are looking at the cost of being in or out?
So cost is an important aspect to all of this. Even IP intensive businesses, we don't have elastic budgets. We need to make sure that we get value for money. So it is the right question to ask. Patent proprietors will need to weigh up, Nigel, the possible benefits of obtaining a unitary patent in terms of the broader coverage that can be secured at less expense as compared to what you can get traditionally. And I think for the pharma type companies, there's huge benefits in using this system because they'll get protection across pretty much all the member states in Europe, in the EU. And then there are other businesses, different models such as our own, where typically we get patent protection in only a few select markets, key markets, maybe in 3 UPC countries, together with the UK and Spain, which, as you know, are non-UPC markets. So in terms of cost, for us, there may be no real cost benefit in using the UP over the national filing traditional route. So it's always a question of weighing up these factors and also thinking about portfolio management and pruning cases over time and doing the right thing. The unitary nature of the new right may be a disadvantage for some businesses. For example, it will only be possible to maintain or abandon the entire right rather than merely dropping 1 or 2 of the less important jurisdictions, as is possible under the traditional system. And equally, the UP has benefits of having to manage a single renewal fee and deal with a single patent register rather than multiple national patent fees and patent registers, as is traditionally the case. And the real prospect of patent infringements anytime, anywhere, in regard to particular areas of technology, may be another material factor in favour of getting UP protection.
Bobby, you mentioned previously it's all around the value proposition of what this can bring to a business. And Nigel, I'm just thinking from a standpoint of speaking to IP teams, they really need to think about that and figure out the different scenarios and how they would play out, from a commercial standpoint and a value proposition standpoint for their organizations.
No, for sure. And I think Bobby and I have worked together for a very long time. And the reason that, the profession has such deep respect for Bobby is the thoughtful way he goes about the practical application of quite complex law. And with all these questions, you just got to start with why. You can't just get yourself into the weeds. And I think Bobby's pulling out the most important foundations on which you build patent strategy, like predictability, like cost, like time. But you can't take any one item of that equation. It's got to be all seen in the round. And then, of course, it's got to be added together with how you're managing your IP strategy in the United States or in Japan or in China. So there's no getting away from the fact that Bobby, yet again, is just right when he said this is one of the most profound changes that's hit the IP profession. And in the challenge on the IP profession, the patent attorneys, of which sort of Bobby's soon to be president of the Chartered Institute for that profession in the United Kingdom, is making sure they can communicate in ways that is clear, that is accessible to the C-suite, so they can make the decision about whether they want to be part of this system and influence the system for the future, or whether they want to have it as another tick box exercise, whether they save $10 on a national right. And I don't think it's about that.
Bobby, if you're a head of IP and you're sat there in front of the CEO and the CEO asks you the simple question, do I get more protection? How easy is that to answer?
You have to go into the detail and understand what technologies you're looking at. You have to look at it case by case, Francesca. It's absolutely the right question to ask, and getting the right protection strategy in place is fundamental to that. The European market is important for us, as is the US, because that's where our biggest competition lies, and we have other key markets. There are, as Nigel said earlier, different aspects to the strategy, and you have to look at it in the round, and you have to make sure from a patenting strategy perspective that you protect those key technology areas and in the key markets. And certainly in BAE Systems, our approach is we look at inventions generously at the outset, and as time rolls on, we look at inventions more critically, and we prune the case. We prune cases in consultation with our business colleagues. We don't do this in isolation. We take this seriously, and we work closely with our colleagues across the business. This is a team sport at the end of the day. To get it right, we are all accountable for the management of our intellectual property assets. The bottom line question is, are we creating value using our intellectual property? I think that's incredibly important to remember in all of this, and to recognize that we do that in different contexts, and to actually flesh that out when presenting it to whoever asked the question.
Well, thank you, Bobby. We've covered a lot here. We're 18 months on, so it still feels like, this is very much in the early stages of development. So what do you think the future holds?
I'm an optimist. I think the new UP system has found its feet. I think its future is bright, provided that it continues to provide high quality, predictable, balanced judgments. And so far, so good, as discussed. For users, it all boils down to getting value for money and trusting the system. Who knows, there may be a time, hopefully, when the UK can rejoin it.
Wow, Bobby, that's a lot to take in, but such an important topic. For listeners who are trying to understand what is most important, what are the key takeaways you would give to the listeners?
Be engaged. And certainly my request to the profession is get involved in policy. Make your voice known. Every voice matters. And what I've learned over the years is it's worth putting in that time and effort to try and shape policy and make a positive difference, not just for the business, but for the wider ecosystem and for society at large. Intellectual property is an enabler. It's valuable for society, and we will have an important role to play in that.
The Unitary Patent represents a significant change to how European innovation can be protected. It's fascinating to hear how Bobby frames the national, European, and global perspectives, the complex balance of opportunities and threats, explain why it has taken decades to get this off the ground. Now we have the first glimpse of a single patent right across Europe. The reactions are broadly positive. For the UK, however, Brexit meant leaving the system, and the hope is we can find a way to rejoin, which I believe is possible even in the current environment. From a European perspective, the benefits are obvious. Ease of enforcement across 18 European countries, with more to follow, balanced against the risk that your European patent rights are subject to central attack, putting all your eggs in one basket. The court can move quickly. Costs are more reasonable, discovery obligations light, and the court seems willing to deploy the powerful remedy of a pan-European injunction. Whilst it's clear that we need to wait and see, Bobby's message is compelling. Companies need to engage because the power to influence the future is so much greater from within the system. And in times of powerful geopolitical forces, Europe needs a stable and strong IP infrastructure if it is to compete against global superpowers, including both the US and China. Bobby, it's an absolute honor to interview you on this topic. And I just think the profession should be proud of all the policy that you've contributed to. And we all look forward to your term in office as president of the Chartered Institute of Patent Attorneys. Thank you for the conversation.
Thank you so much, Nigel and Francesca. That's very kind. I thoroughly enjoyed the discussion. And thank you also to everyone for listening.
On less seismic news, this is my last episode of Evolving IP, and I wanted to take the opportunity to thank Frankie and the LexisNexis team for a fantastic podcast series, not to mention the 3 series of Cypher Vision before that. But to all our loyal followers, there's no need to stress, as the podcast will continue in 2025 in the capable hands of Tim Pullman, Marco Richter, and our more than capable and very charming host, Francesca Lavoie.
Well, Nigel, I have to give you a massive thank you. I think you've been an incredibly bright leading light in bringing more IP strategic rigor to everyone here and enabling that by actually coming up with the idea of doing a podcast series in the first place and allowing our listeners to be able to hear shared experiences and really learn and take those experiences forward and make things better for their organization. So a huge thank you. And I think a huge thank you from all our listeners who've been listening to you for 4 years. So thank you.
Thank you, Frankie.
And thank you for tuning into the LexisNexis Evolving IP podcast series. Please continue the conversation on social media and share your thoughts about today's episode on the Unitary Patent 18 months on.